start recording on this. My guest is supposed to be Robert Pelton today, but we're having a little bit of difficulties getting up on all of my channels here. Let me see here if we can do this.
Trying to reach does not accept calls from numbers with caller ID blocked. To unblock your number, dial *82 and try again.
Okay, great. Just a moment here, folks. We're trying to get this fixed here. Don't know quite what happened. Robert, I can't get you. Your phone won't let me call you. It's a blocked number, it says, and it won't let me call you. Can you call me? Call me at 520-413-2397, and I will add you to the call, which is going right now. No, it's 520-413-2397. Okay, thanks. All right. That's handled, hopefully. Robert Pelton.
Yes, sir. That's the big P from Tennessee.
How are you, sir?
I'm doing okay. How about you?
Well, I'm doing all right too. I'm just trying to make everything work here, and for some reason I called you an hour early, and you answered the phone, and everything worked. When I called you at the top of the hour, it tells me I got to dial *82 because you don't accept number for blocked calls.
Well, I don't know what that could be. No, where's the idea?
Well,
try to call me after the show.
Strange things happen on my show.
Well, try to call me after the show when you have time. No rush. I'll be here most of the day, but I'm going to be leaving about at noon till 1 on a rehab program. Okay. Well, that last call I made to you was from my cell phone. It works fine for my cell phone. So. Well, I'll be damned. It just didn't work. It just didn't work on the Skype here. Although it's right up here that I've got Robert Pelton at home right here on my screen right now. That's the number I dialed. It just wouldn't let me come in for some reason. Any rate, Robert Pelton. We've got several of your books up on the site, and you published the survival guides. All those are available. I mean, just right off of the Free American website. Links straight to your shopping carts and everything else. So the new book you've got on the UN, The House That Hiss Built. Right. Now, Anti-American United Nations. Anti-American Nations. United Nations. Yes, sir. And the subtitle, The House That Hiss Built. Okay, let me just go back a little bit in time. The Zionists out there, the people that I believe are responsible, at least as responsible as the Catholic Church for the whole New World Order scam and England, they tried to get world government before. It was called the League of Nations. And if correct me if I'm wrong on my history here, but they
they failed to install the League of Nations before World War I believe.
Right.
Because two countries refused to go along with it, the United States and Russia. So what they did is give us the Federal Reserve Bank here and killed the Tsar and set up communism in Russia. Now, could you take it from there, fill in from there?
Well, the UN came up, in what, right after the war, and it was supposed to be what they called, the propaganda was, it was a peace organization, peacekeeping. But what's really shocking, Clay, really shocking, is that the United States Congress, Senate, voted for that, sight unseen. They had a Red who was reading, telling them what the UN was comprised of and what it was for, and the Senate passed it overwhelmingly by all but 2 votes. Imagine, you're talking about 2 senators from each state, and they all voted for it except 2. This is incredible that our United States Senate, who is looking out for us, would do this. And the thing about it was, not a senator there read the material. Except perhaps the two that voted against it. Who they were, I'm not sure right now. They're in the book, but I can't remember. But, they read some of it, or their aides did. But it was such a monumental piece of trash and such a propaganda piece that what's amazing is that 50-some, all but 2 senators at that time, and of course we didn't have Alaska and Hawaii as states, so it was 48 states. So 48 times 2, that's 96 senators. 94 out of 96 voted for to make the United Nations what it is today. Voted in there by treaty.
Well, this isn't.
Go ahead, sorry.
This isn't anything unusual. The Senate and the House have been selling this out pretty much for 100 years, since 1913, since the bankers took over.
Well, yes, with the look at the Marxist income tax. The beauty of that is, to me, the funny thing about that is that actually, without getting really into the tax thing, but on the bottom of your tax form, take a look at it. It says voluntary contribution. Now, when the hell have you made a voluntary contribution to the IRS? Not in your lifetime. But it says that on the tax form. A voluntary contribution.
Yeah, we have. They brag about that, Robert. We have.
Of course they do.
We have the most. Yeah, we have the most the most successful voluntary tax program out there.
Yeah, really. It's just simply not true. It's propaganda again, But J. Edgar Hoover. I mentioned him because he's been so defamed and discredited. They did not dare, the left, attack J. Edgar Hoover while he was in office. Lyndon Johnson tried. He backed off. He backed off. Martin Luther King was going to go to Hanoi, if you remember, when he was top of the line, a black man in the country. He was going to go to Hanoi and negotiate for peace during the Vietnam War. J. Edgar Hoover says, no, you don't, or I will expose you. What was he going to expose? Well, he happened to have tapes of Martin Luther King in his motel rooms, shacked up on his escapades, on his trips to speak all over the country on race relations and so on. He was a godly, man, of course. He was a minister. But he had his aides supply him with white prostitutes that would allow him not only to have sex, but to beat them. He had a thing for beating white women. Well, he had to hire prostitutes. Yes, he did this. This is not unusual. It even came out, one of his aides came out with a book, I can't remember the guy's name, one of his top aide came out with a book, not, a few years ago, but long after the thing happened. Long after. And he admitted this. So it wasn't just Hoover. But what I'm pointing at is, there's a movie out that's absolutely a disgrace as far as I'm concerned, with Leonardo DiCaprio ought to be strung up for lying. If he's that ignorant, then he should be made to read about the truth about Hoover. But he came out with a movie, J. Edgar, I believe it's called. And it was a total. It made Holden look like he was a pervert. He was a pedophile. He liked young boys. He sat in the throne with his pajamas on, and he just liked to fool around with kids. None of that's true. There was a book. Where did it come from? Well,
Ted Gunderson didn't believe that either.
Well, look, somebody wrote a book some years back, before this movie, probably 10 years before the movie, and it said exactly the same thing. Somebody picked the book up and said, hey, wow, we can really use this. Because the movie is only about the book. It tells what the author in that book said. Now, the point here is, Clay, is that that book would never have been published by a legitimate publisher, period. Because a legitimate publisher would have asked for documentation on such a thing as that. But it would be published by a owned and paid for left-wing publisher. Who they were, I don't know right now offhand, but hey, they published the book. And on Martin Luther King. I'm sorry, J. Edgar Hoover. But it said the same thing that the movie said. And I looked at the book when it first came out, and I thought, you've got to be kidding. How did this guy, I'm a writer. How did this guy get away with this? Now, in my UN book, for example, I say Algerhist was a communist agent, and he supplied every damned employee that was hired for the UN, and he made sure nobody else got in. Okay, you're talking hundreds, even thousands of people. He had the job of determining. Now, am I just saying this? No, it's provable. It's documented. It's all there. There's a history of this. I really got the little facts here and now, put them all together in a book, exposing the UN for what it is, a Trojan horse. And if people listening to your show don't know what the Trojan horse was back in history, then they better read a little history before we go any further, because I'm not going to tell them what the Trojan horse is.
Well, we have all these representatives from all over the world, and one of the reasons I think that the Soviet Union was allowed to go down, because I still have a hard time answering a question. Maybe you can answer one. Who won the Cold War?
Well, according to the history writers of today, actually, technically, we did.
Well, let's see. The Cold War, the Soviet Union was one of those nasty communist countries, and let's see. It just so happens, I have a little booklet here that's got all 10 planks of the Communist Manifesto in them, and
exactly.
Every plank is right. The only thing that's missing here are the proper names used today, but we've got the central bank, we've got the heavy progressive income tax that nobody really owes, we've got abolition of all rights of inheritance, confiscation of properties of all immigrants and rebels. Oh, what is that marijuana I smell? Well, you must be a rebel. You're going to go to jail.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct on that. And anybody that does not believe you, all they have to do is get online and get a copy of the Communist Manifesto.
I love here. The only thing they don't have here, they've got plank number 9, corporate farms and regional planning. They just don't say sustainable development. Agenda 21, Monsanto and Archer Daniels Midland. That's all. That's all.
It's not sustainable. What it is they're using those standable fertilizers that you can plant. The seeds that you can plant one time, and once the plants grow, then that's the end of your farm. They don't grow the next year. You can't keep the seeds, cultivate those seeds that you grow. I'm talking anything from corn, potatoes, you name it, corn, potatoes, carrots, you name it. It will not regrow the next year when you plant the seeds because they're sterile.
Terminator seed.
That's been done deliberately. Now you can buy seeds that can be planted, and this is what people have to look for. Get online, you can find them. You can get a number 10 can with blue bags of seeds. All of them come from farmers that have, or farms that have, plants that reproduce.
Now, Robert,
so
I've told people in my audience here for 20 years now that when a communist regime takes over a country, they go after 3 classes of people in order. They go after the farmers first because they don't want you to feed yourself. They go after the intelligentsia next. That's anyone smart enough to know what they're doing, like McCarthy. And third, they go after the law enforcement and police that are loyal to the old regime. Now, hasn't this has happened in South Africa? It's happened in Germany. It's happened in Rhodesia. Let's see, Rhodesia. No. I'm sorry, that's Zimbabwe. After they killed all the white people, then they called it Zimbabwe. Explain to me. Tell me that was the. Now, if I'm the Rhodesia, correct me if I'm wrong on any of this. Rhodesia established a constitution based on ours, and the UN went in and removed them from power and gave it to some black guy. Tell me what happened. Yes.
Black Marxist, who was educated in the Soviet Union. So, you know, this is the name of the game. Does this show you something, though? How much control do those people have in our government? When all of these things, I've often asked, well, I have, by the way, you mentioned McCarthy. Let me throw a plug in here.
Please.
And people need to read these books. I have what's called the McCarthy Chronicles, Book 1, Treason, Book 2, McCarthy Chronicles, Traitors. They're about 500 pages apiece. They are, and they're easy reads, very exciting to read, almost like a good novel. And you can read about the different plants that the Soviets brought in back in the 30s. And in fact, it was the coined phrase is that out of Harvard, for example, which was one of the major ones captured, Harvard, a swarm of lawyers, left-wing lawyers, communist lawyers, came from Harvard into the federal government and got positions. Of course, we had people then like Alger Hiss and all of his cohorts. They fixed each other up with jobs. The first thing Stalin said when they go into a nation in America was to infiltrate the Department of Agriculture. Why? Well, exactly what you just said. Second thing was you filter them out from one department into whenever there's a controversy and somebody exposes one of them, do they fire them as good Americans ought to? No. They transfer them laterally. Why? Because their own people are doing it. So they transfer them into State Department. Now, the thing about it is, Trey, what's so important about the State Department? Well, it controls our foreign policy. That's what's so important about it. Who controls America's foreign policy? Why did we do what we did to Rhodesia? This is nothing new. What did we do? Let's go back to 1949. Why did we do what we did to China? We disarmed China. Oh, yeah, we sent them weapons, tons and tons of weapons. The record shows this. But they were defunct weapons. They didn't work. And the ones that did work, that they had, we refused to send them ammunition. So we disarmed them. George Marshall did it. George Marshall, a general in the United States Army, had to be a Red. I'm saying had to be. Why can't I say he was? Well, because I don't know. I don't know. But, as McCarthy said, if it looks like a duck, it quacks like a duck, and acts like a duck, then it probably is a duck. But George Marshall's, all of his records, for example, going even back to the POW thing, which I've also got a book on, the POW situation, George Marshall said, hey, discard the records, burn them. Second World War, burn them. Get rid of them. Shred them. Okay, so I guess that's what they did. But George Marshall was the commander of everything in the war after World War II, and he said, burn all the POW records. Well, it just happened, Clay, that the figure used was tens of thousands of Americans and allies, which would be British, Australian, and so on. Tens of thousands of our servicemen were left behind. How did they get left behind? I'll get this over real quick. We had a lot of Germans, had a lot of POW camps, prisoner of war camps. They did not mistreat Americans in those camps by and large. They fed them what they could. A lot of times they starved because they didn't have food coming in, thanks to the war. I mean, that's the way it was. That's the way it was. But what they did was, when Russia was moving in, the Germans left those camps intact as they were. They didn't shoot all the Americans. They left. They split. Let them go on their own. Well, the Russians moved in and liberated Americans. Imagine liberator. What a beautiful word. What a beautiful word. You ask your average congressman what liberated means. He said, oh, that's the freedom. Yeah, free. Well, no. That was to put them on trucks and trains and ship them back to the Soviet Union for hard labor, for slave labor in the Gulag. G-U-L-A-G. People, if you're listening to this show, if you don't know what the Gulag is, hey, read up on it. Go on your internet and check on what happened. This is all fact. You can find these things on the internet.
The gulags. You're talking about Russia right now.
Well, of course. Russia. They shipped them back to the Soviet Union for slave labor. Okay? Why? Well, because Russia was owed a debt. And the debt was that they had supposedly be our allies, right? They helped us. Come on. They didn't help us for crying out loud. They did everything they could to help themselves, which is true the way it is. So what we did was turn around. Same thing happened with the Japanese in World War II. Hey, whatever reparations they were made to pay, they paid them to the Soviet Union in bodies. In bodies. They calculated each human being how much it was.
Hold on a second here. I got something that's not working here.
Yeah, something buzzing.
Yeah, what happened here? What did we lose here? Okay. All right.
Okay. Real quick.
Go ahead.
The Russians made a deal, and they put a price tag for the Japanese, for example, on what is a human being worth? What is a prisoner worth? So they say $80. If it wasn't that, but say $75, $80. All right. They calculated the reparations in millions of dollars, and then the Japanese, but what they did was they turned over those Japanese prisoners and the Chinese that the Japanese had captured for $75 a head, and they went to the Soviet Union for slave labor, where they died. Now, has ever any of this come out in the history books? No. Nothing has come out. If you read about the UN, and you see this penny-waste group running around to save the UN, always hollering about taking donations, the UN organization in the U.S., supporting the UN. Why? It's a Trojan horse on the East River in New York. Hey, listen, go back on this thing. When did it become a, well, it's always been a Trojan horse. I mean, let me talk about let me talk about the man here that is so discredited now because they didn't dare discredit him when he was alive, J. Edgar Hoover. He said this. He said it was the United Nations headquarters couldn't be a better place for America's red enemies and their spying activities, nor could it be a worse place from the standpoint of America's national security. He said they are guests. Now get this, here's the key. They're guests. United Nations people, they're guests of the U.S. They're dedicated supposedly to the cause of international peace. Exact words of Hoover. But he said this, quote, they are in fact carefully selected envoys of the international communist conspiracy, trained in trickery and deceit, dedicated to the concept of fully exploiting the freedoms of the countries they seek to destroy. And punishment for spying in the UN is non-existent. Why? Because they're simply sent back home if they're caught. If it makes the press, they're caught and they send them back to their country, get another spy replaced. Now, they get punished back there for getting caught? No. They got a soft job with the communist government, the Russians, primarily. But the Chinese do the same thing. Any left-wing, any communist, any Marxist country does the same thing. Unfortunately, the thing is going so far now, Clay, that we have a man in the White House who, for all practical purposes, is said to be a Marxist. He's also said to be a Muslim. Is he? Well, I saw a picture in a magazine, like People magazine or something, the other day. I was getting a haircut, and I looked at that. There's a picture of Mr. Obama, his wife, and daughters going to church. And it said they were going to such a Presbyterian church in Washington, D.C. Since when? Yeah, he probably did go with his, or he had a, what they call a photo op. Did they go? I don't know. If they went, it was for promotion only, because he claims at times he purports to be a Christian. I mean, this is a man who never would wear a lapel pin on his coat before there was a big controversy over it. He would never put his hand over his heart during the national anthem. What did he do? He put his hands by his crotch. I mean, he just had him down, told him in front of him. Well, why? Because he felt like the flag of the United States represented, it was like America was a terrorist group. Why? Because we're so powerful? We police the world? Yeah. So we're a bad group. We're a bad people. We're a warlike nation. Well, so what? We should be. If not for us, the whole world would be gone. You know, it's close to blowing itself up anyway. But the point is that the U.S. was a bastion of civilization, and of goodness. We have given more foreign aid with no strings attached, no loans I'm talking about, but like given away without any payback to more countries. There's something like 109 nations in the UN. And we probably have given every one of those nations money. Okay,
we are just let me bring this up for just a second. Now that you've mentioned it, the right now today we are giving foreign aid to 150 countries around the world, and there's only what 192.
Yeah.
And we are actually giving foreign aid to places like China. Who owes us money, actually, more than we don't owe them money. There's other debts that we don't know about that are just folded under here. But this is we talk about communist. In your book on McCarthy got slammed and buried because he was trying to point out that we got communists right here. We've got communists that are doing this.
Well, McCarthy came too close to the top is what happened with McCarthy. They would have left him alone, but he was getting to the big boys. And they destroyed him. Eisenhower was behind the major destruction of Joe McCarthy. He despised the man. You can get his quotes off the internet. He despised McCarthy. He wanted to get in completely, get him, bury him. You know, this is General President Eisenhower, who, the man, he was such an anti-McCarthy character, and he was the guy, he was one of the major players in the destruction of Joe McCarthy. Why? Was Joe getting too close to Ike?
Well, let's see, that terrible Polish Jew, who hated Germans.
Oh, absolutely despised them. So did George Marshall. George Marshall was one of the leaders, and Secretary of Treasury was, I can't think of his name right now, but he was an out-and-out red. And they made a point that even fertilizer could not get into Germany. Because, see, the German people could have restored their independence, could have restored, at least saved their starving population by planting. They were great farmers. But we denied them fertilizer. This is verifiable. I'm not just some nut talking about. Hey, you can get this on the internet. You can get it in various books. There's incredible books that are out there. One is called Other Losses, and it's by a Frenchman. His name is spelled B-A-C-Q-U-E. He's got two great books. One is Other Losses, and one is Crimes and Mercies. Now, let me tell you something. This guy, I believe he's a Frenchman, he wrote two of the best or most outstanding documentaries on what happened after World War II. What happened to the German people? We had imprisoned German soldiers, put them in camps. And, I'm talking about the ordinary GI who was a Nazi, who was nothing. And if any German citizen, and this is in written orders by Eisenhower, were to try to slip food into these people. Now, we gave them no food, no clothing, no tents, no nothing. There's photographs to prove this. Photographs to prove it. They were living in mud and slime. Okay, they had nothing. But they were just off the Rhine River. Okay, so they didn't have a water shortage. They did because they weren't allowed to go to the Rhine River, which was running distance, and get a drink. We were starving them and not giving them any moisture, any water. And Eisenhower said, hey, they're to be shot if they head to the Rhine River, and there were some shot. They were out of desperation. Now, he also said any German civilian who is caught passing food through the fence, now these are just starving people, is to be shot on sight. Now, these books prove, without a question, they're so well documented and footnoted, there was no question as to what Eisenhower was. If there were war crimes, which there may someday be, he would be tried in absentia, because he's dead, but he would be convicted of war crimes. This is a